Good evening, everyone. Tonight we have Suki Kim and Roger Hodge here to discuss the new book published on October 14th, Without You, There Is No Us. Her fascinating new book, which chronicles her 6-month stay in North Korea, where she taught English to the sons of the North Korean elite. So this book has been described as enthralling, reveals the perplexing innocence and ignorance of one of the world's most secretive countries. This is from O, the Oprah magazine. And then this other one, I should say quote first. Strangely terrifying, a beautifully written book that greatly expands the limited bounds of what we know about North Korea's ruling class, by Barbara Demick, author of Nothing to Envy. Suki Kim is the author of the award-winning novel The Interpreter. She has been traveling to North Korea as a journalist since 2002, and her essays and articles have appeared in the New York Times, Harper's, the New York Review of Books, and she has been the recipient of a Guggenheim, a Fulbright, and an Open Society Fellowship. Born in Seoul, she lives in New York. Roger Hodge is the editor of Oxford American and the author of The Mendacity of Hope, Presidential Power, Corporate Money, and the Politics of Corrupt Influence. Hodge's essays have appeared in many publications, including Texas Monthly, the London Review of Books, Popular Science, Men's Journal, and Harper's Magazine, where he was editor-in-chief. And he is now writing a book about the life in the West Texas borderlands. Thank you.
So I think we'll start with a reading from Suki.
Okay, hi. Thank you for coming. So the book just came out, and I'm going to read just a very, very short excerpt, just so that I don't know if any of you read the book since it just came out. So I'll just read a little bit, and then we can talk about it. Roger and I will have a conversation, and we'll have a Q&A. So the prologue of the book is, time there seemed to pass differently. When you're shut off from the world, every day is exactly the same as the one before. The sameness has a way of wearing down your soul until you become nothing but a breathing, toiling, consuming thing that awakes to the sun and sleeps at the dawning of the dark. The emptiness runs deep, deeper with each slowing day, and you become increasingly invisible and inconsequential. That's how I felt at times. A tiny insect circling itself only to continue and continue. There in that relentless vacuum, nothing moved. No news came in or out, no phone calls to or from anyone, no emails, no letters, no ideas not prescribed by the regime. 30 missionaries disguised as teachers, and 270 male North Korean students and me, the sole writer disguised as a missionary, disguised as a teacher. Locked in that prison, disguised as a campus, in an empty Pyongyang suburb, heavily guarded around the clock, all we had was one another. So that's the prologue of the book, which sort of sets a tone of my whole experience there. And I'll just read a little section that perhaps I think maybe tells, there are a lot of stories in the book, a lot of anecdotes. And I guess this is one of those moments that sticks out in the book. And it happens about, I would say, like a third of the book on page 94. And it's when, we all had to sit and have a meal with students, one teacher and 3 students. So 4 would have a meal, every meal 3 times a day. And different students each time, so different combo. But they all reported on each other. So, and the students were reporting on me. So the conversation was always tense. And there were so many things that we were not allowed to talk about. One of which, many, there's so many, obviously the outside world was a taboo topic. And, and there was a student who then was asking me questions. So he was not interested in small talk. Have you heard of the song of General Kim Jong Il? He asked. Yes, I said cautiously. What do you think of it? He asked me, point blank. I froze. Complete honesty was out of the question, but I wanted to answer as truthfully as I could, so I said, you and I come from different systems. Americans have their national anthem. Britain has theirs. South Korea has theirs too. I understand that that particular song is basically your national anthem, and I respect that. He seemed to reflect on my answer for a little while. Meanwhile, the other two at the table looked nervous and remained quiet until one of them blurted out a question about soccer. But this particular student was not deterred. He shot out another question. National Assembly, tell me about it. National Assembly? What National Assembly? Whose National Assembly? I said, slightly panicked. You mean in South Korea or the US Congress? They're all different, so it's impossible to say. He was not easily dissuaded. Any country doesn't matter. Tell me the general idea. You're American, so tell me how it works in America, he said, meeting my eyes. Uncertain how much I was allowed to reveal, I took a deep breath and answered in the simplest way I knew. I told him that the United States is made up of 50 states and that the people in those states elect representatives to Congress. We have an elected president too, I said, and the president and representatives have to work with one another to pass laws. So in fact, it is the people who make decisions. But I think it is the president who should make decisions, he fired back. He has the power, no? I believe I closed my eyes in that moment. I felt weak in the knees. Perhaps living among such devout missionaries had made me religious because I broke into a mental prayer then to anyone, anywhere to give me the strength to tell the truth. This was the exact kind of conversation we had been warned against. I knew that this student might be trying to trap me, or worse, that I might get him in serious trouble. It's like this, I said cautiously. For example, at this school, President James Kim is the face of POOST. But the real power is not his, nor should it be his. This entire school is about the students, not President Kim. It's the same in our system. Our country is not for the president, but the people. The president is just the face, the symbol, but the real power belongs to the people. The people make the decisions. What I had just described was more or less democracy. I could not read the expression on his face. But almost immediately afterward, he said, "Thank you, Professor. I do not want to take up too much of your time. It was my pleasure to have dinner with you." That evening, Katie, who was my TA, and I circled the campus a few times again, discussing our growing fears about his motives. Perhaps he was on a mission to earn some sort of reward by trading information about us. So what? Katie said. The most they could do is deport us. So we get deported and get sent home, which would be just fine. What if that's not the case? What if he's genuinely curious? The second scenario made us both grim. What if we were the instigators of his doubt? What if he was beginning to realize that everything he had known thus far was a lie, and that we were the ones who held the key to the truth? We agreed that we should never sit with him again, not even if he asked. A dinner with us might get him killed, Katie said. I wanted to dismiss the comment as the melodrama of a 23-year-old, but I knew it wasn't that. In North Korea, such a consequence was entirely possible. So then on page 98, this is how this whole section ends, which is, it was the parents of our students who were at the helm of this country, responsible for making the way it was. And these very young men would inherit that task. Most of them were being groomed to hold top positions and to help their precious leader suppress and isolate the people, which would ensure that he remained in power. Such was the prescribed course of their future as the offspring of the privileged class. Such was the best case scenario. And as their teachers, we were the ones who would arm these young men with enough English to combat the world they were conditioned to view as the enemy. Until then, I had hoped that perhaps I could change one student, open up one path of understanding. But what kind of a future did I envision for the one student I reached? Opening up this country would mean sacrificing these lives. Opening up this country would mean the blood of my beautiful students. I recalled his face and tried not to think of the terrible consequences. And that night and many nights afterward passed like this in Pyongyang. This particular night, there was an endless, mournful rain. Fear can creep up on you anywhere, but when it does in North Korea, it is a lonely feeling. From that night on, when I looked at the faces of my boys, I would think, and then try not to think, of what lay ahead for them. One of the vocabulary words I had to teach was fleeting. I would use the phrase, youth is fleeting. And while gazing at them, repeating the phrase aloud, I would think how much briefer their youth was than that of young men their age back home. But I did not like to reflect on this. Anytime I imagined the gloom of their future, I shook it off as quickly as I could so that I could stand being there in that time, teaching them the English language to the best of my ability. Now, a few years later, their faces still come to me one by one. And this motherly feeling overwhelms me. I taught them how to speak, this strange breed of children, unaware of the world outside. Yet I hope they have forgotten everything I inspired in them and have simply grown to become soldiers of the regime. I do not want to imagine what might happen if they retained my lessons, remembered me, began questioning the system. I cannot bear the idea that any of my students, my boys, who eagerly shouted, "Good morning, Professor Kim, how are you?" every time I walked into the classroom, might end up somewhere dark and cold in one of the gulags that exist all over North Korea. The thought keeps me awake at night still. That's it. Thank you.
Well, that was a very powerful passage, which opens up a lot of potential questions. But I want to back up a little bit to give some context, or at least to explore some context. You said that youth is fleeting, and I want to take us back to your youth. And
a long time ago.
and try to get from your immigration experience to your interest in North Korea. So can you tell us a little bit about how you came from Korea to the United States?
So I came when I was 13 so I was born and raised in South Korea, and we sort of fled here and in sort of a complicated immigration history. Like my father lost everything overnight and literally fled. So it was quite a turbulent. We ended up in Queens. I didn't speak a word of English, so I really found it difficult to come here, and I went through so many public schools. Terrible, the worst, they said. One of the schools I went, because I moved a lot of schools, was like the worst school district in the United States. That was Jersey City, and where I ended up graduating from eventually. So it was a struggle. And then I went to college in the city, in Manhattan, and then sort of roamed around a lot, like sort of homeless.
Well, you describe going through fellowship after fellowship and living in isolated places, and did that was North Korea just another stop on that itinerary, or was there something particular about North Korea that drew you, aside from the fact that it was Korea? Where I mean, you didn't go to live for long periods of time in South Korea, did you?
I did too.
Oh, you
I
did.
traveled a lot. All of my 20s I traveled, and I do think that when you do, I talk about that in the book. The loss of home, which happened at a very crucial age, which was 13, I think permanently traumatized me in some sense. And so there is this constant longing for home that I've carried with me. But I also come from, on both sides of my family, we come from separated families. So my mother had lost her brother during the war, who ended up in the north, and also my dad's two cousins who were like sisters to him, both got lost to North Korea during the war. So I think this sorrow, my grandmother literally died of heartbreak. And I think, so that separate, when you come from a separated family, it's just, you're just told this story over and over and over and over, how people got separated. And I think I was amazed to learn that this had affected so many families in Korea. I was not the only, it was on both sides of my family, and we're not even from North Korea. We were all from South Korea, but in Seoul during the war. And still, the people who got lost, my aunt, I guess, and my uncle were all age 17 and 18, and they all ended up in North. And I think this separation was that heartache. I've carried that with me, and then my own history of losing home, which really did happen at 13, and language. I wanted to be a writer, and I lost my language, which to me still, Korean still feels like my language more than English, amazingly, after all these years. So, I think that when I did go to Pyongyang, and I do refer to this in the book, in 2002, I went there for the first time, and I really identified with, I think, this loss. It's a land, it felt really odd to be there. I remember February 2002, I went there for Kim Jong Il's 60th birthday celebration, and I felt, why am I standing here? My grandmother wanted to find her son forever, and she died because there's no way for her to see this land. My mother, she lost her brother, and yet I was here, their child, and I felt like I needed to somehow make sense of it. It was really that identification of loss.
So the first time you went was for that birthday celebration, and then you went back with the Philharmonic.
Yeah, the first time was I went there with what they called homecoming trip. That happened to be Kim Jong Il's 60th birthday celebration, and I joined this group, which turned out to be a pro Kim Jong Il group. I didn't know it then. I thought it was just a Korean American group, and I actually joined these people, and they were going to Pyongyang, and I did interview with them twice, but they barely asked any questions. They just said, "Why do you want to go?" And I told them the story, and then that my uncle got lost, my aunts got lost, and they said fine. And then suddenly they didn't explain anything, and then I was on the plane there, and then when I arrived on the plane, I actually wrote about this for the New York Review of Books in a really long essay, because on the plane they kept whispering about delegates, because the group were about 30 people, and they were all divided into artist group, fundraising, I think, group, and then there was a delegate group. And I didn't know what it meant, but the delegates were only 5 of them. And I did meet them, and they said that they were like banned from South Korea. They were activists, serious political activists, and who believed in the cause of Kim Jong Il. And then they kept talking about the 5th delegate, which turned out to be me. Like, I didn't know that I was the 5th delegate. I was like, wow, they keep still talking about 5 delegates, but I only see 4. And then when I got off the airplane, it was like they, because I thought it was just like a trip, but actually like people, there were, TV cameras were there, which turned out to be Jungang, Korean Central TV, which is their only television station, clearly. And and like Nodong Shinmun, their newspaper was there, and they were all taking photographs. And then someone just ran up to me and said, like, I mean, they're very good at like telling you that you are Kim 선생님 means like you're like a teacher or something. So they were all like bowing at me, like, and this is like before my novel had even come out. So I didn't know why they were all so happy to see me. That's because I was a fifth delegate. The youth delegate, they said, they billed me without telling me that there was this youth delegate who really believed in Kim Jong Il, and who and I realized later that I was chosen because I spoke both language fluently, and I had told them that I was like writing a novel, it was gonna come out. So I think they thought I was gonna write stuff to glorify the great leader. So I didn't know, and then like so everybody else from this group that I kind of more identify with, because these are serious activists, like very serious. And then they were like, singers, there were artist groups who were going to perform at the Kim Jong-il celebration. I didn't know that either. And so I was going to go with them, and they were like, no, VIPs come in this car. And there was like this really fancy car. I guess it's just the old-fashioned, BMW or something that they drive there. So I got pulled away from everyone into this VIP car. And then I went to the VIP quarter because I was a youth delegate. I didn't know. And then when I went, it was like the party leaders would come visit, and they would like give all these juche lessons. And then they had the TV on all the time. The thing about in North Korea is there's always some sound. TV or music or something's always being played. And then I saw my face on TV. And it was like the American, delegates had just arrived to honor our great leader. And there I was on their television. And it was just like a bizarre, and I couldn't really talk about any of this. I barely knew these people I was with. So I spent like 8 days there with them. Every day they took me to like Kim Il-sung University. I got to see a lot of things beyond just like Juche Tower. When you go to North Korea, you only see maybe like 5 things. There's Juche Tower, there's a subway. You see the same exact thing over and over. I've seen that subway stop like each of my visit. Only the same stop. But I like at the end, I had to do a karaoke with the party leaders on that trip, because it was a Kim Jong-il celebration. It was a birthday. But, the great leader was never there because they said he's very busy overseeing the people, because he's always doing field guidance, taking care of his people. So I had to, so we were always celebrating his birthday every day. When you go out on the street, when the minders take you out, they were always dancing, celebrating. So the last day, we had all the celebration event, but even in the little thing, like we had to they put the karaoke machine on, and all the party leaders came, and I had to sing.
And what did you sing?
This was really complicated because you don't think about that. But then when they're like, so now you sing, the youth leader, you sing. And I thought, wow, there are not many songs I can sing. It's not like I was going to break out into ABBA. It's just like, I didn't know. And I realized I can't really sing South Korean pop songs, or really English songs are out of question. So literally the only song, and I was very clever, but I think somebody actually whispered that to me. The only song allowed was 아침 이슬, which is this morning dew song. It's a song that was used as a demonstration folk song in South Korea against the dictator regime in the 70s. So it's like people's song, very popular, but it was a political song against the dictatorship, a South Korean song criticizing the government. So that song was allowed there. So I remember singing, and 70s, South Korean 70s is a time of Park Chung-hee dictatorship, and so many college students, many of them got imprisoned, and singing this song, crying for democracy in South Korea. And I thought it was really odd that I ended up in North Korea doing karaoke, singing this song with the Workers' Party leaders. So that was that trip, which I wrote the whole essay for the New York Review of Books.
And then the next time you went back was also a musical occasion.
Oh, so another musical occasion for, actually, Roger was the editor-in-chief of Harper's Magazine, and I wrote a piece for you,
yes,
basically. Philharmonic in Pyongyang.
And what the thing that I remember most about that piece was the strange way in which some of the participants in the trip seemed almost to echo behavioral patterns that seem North Korean.
The orchestra.
Yeah.
Yeah, the orchestra. I spent a week with them. You know, the thing about writing these stories, I think that because I'm not the conventional journalist, you do kind of have to be embedded if you're going to come back with a story. And, you know, the way I think the whole 60th birthday celebration ended up being a whole journey, I think Philharmonic thing also was. There was no way I could do that piece. Philharmonic people the journalists only went for 36 hours into Pyongyang. So if I just did that, I would have come back with whatever sightseeing that I did in Pyongyang, which is the same library, same subway stop. So instead, I ended up spending a week with the orchestra. And I saw New Philharmonic concert like every night, and I'm not a classical music person. So I was like sleeping through each one, which is unfortunate because I feel like the real classical music fans, this just would have been dream come true. But I did go to every one of their concerts through Shanghai and Beijing, try to interview the violinists, the timpanists, and trying to get an answer about how they feel about going in there. And it was amazing because they had their, I can't say the great leader, but they had their, Lauren Mazel, the conductor. So they kind of did what they were told. And they gave me the exact answer. We believe in musical diplomacy and finding harmony between the Koreas. And it was amazing to interview them and getting exact same soundbite over and over and over. And then we went into North Korea, and then whoever you asked said exactly the same thing as the orchestra said. So you had these two groups that seemed to mirror each other.
It's fascinating. Okay, so let's get on to the book. So this trip was it was a strange process. You write about how you interviewed and you had to provide all of these necessities for yourself. Talk a little bit about that, your preparations for the trip.
So PUST, which is Pyongyang University of Science and Technology, I learned about that school when I went on to Pyongyang in 2008 for Harper's magazine. And someone there told me, one of the funders told me the school was being built. So I applied for a job there instantly. And then it just went on and on and on, because it's obviously impossible to set up a joint project in North Korea. So depending on the political crisis, it was, there was a Chananam, the ship sank, and that affected everything. Whenever there was some sort of tension, it looked like the school was going to open and not open.
And what is the school? Tell just briefly.
Pyongyang University of Science and Technology is this school in this suburb of Pyongyang that is all male, and not the staff. There's a North Korean staff, but the teachers were entirely foreigners. And although it's a science and technology, it's still ongoing, and they have now, I guess, science teacher. But when I was there in 2011, it was all just English. There was no science being taught. It was only English was being taught.
And the partnership here. This is a school that is funded, organized by.
It's an organization that is run by this Korean American, I guess, evangelical, who had set up a school similar in Yanji, China, called Yanbian University of Science and Technology. So there's a model there already, which had been a successful model, and then he started, thinking of doing the same project, starting, something like 2000, I think, and then the school got built and it's funded. South Korean government puts in some money, but as far as I know, North Korean government does not fund. There's no money coming from North Korea, and the rest of the money comes from churches around the world.
and most of the teachers they consider themselves missionaries. Is that right?
I think they call them educators who are Christian. Is
Uh-huh.
I think the official term, which is I guess it's a vague term to signal missionaries. Because the thing is, we all know that proselytizing is not allowed there. Although, Jeffrey Fowle just got back, we have Kenneth Bay there serving a 15-year sentence right now. So, although we cannot prove that whether he did proselytize or not proselytize, but obviously it's a crime according to defectors, could even be punishable by execution. So, and then you have these groups who go in there who are all Christian missionaries, hardcore missionaries. So I think, so they had made a pact to not proselytize at all. So the North Korean side know that they are, but because they allow them to practice within there's just one room where they do service on Sundays, but that's it. You never talk about Christianity, not even with each other really, because we use J for Jesus, M for minister, even in the room, with each other, because it's all bugged there anyway. So it's an odd situation of missionaries who are not missionaries there.
Fascinating. So your fellow teachers and you are under observation from many different perspectives. You said there were bugs everywhere, but you write about how you're never alone, how you always feel like you're being watched. Can you talk a little bit about that experience of the surveillance?
That's a general experience I've had going into North Korea every time. Like, you're just not alone, because the minders will come and take your phone and, passport, and then they just are with you all the time. But in the school, the minders live there in the faculty dormitory on the ground floor, so they're there all the time. And then your lessons, you have to get them approved by counterparts or this set of North Korean teachers. I didn't know where they were. They're not anywhere visible. They've got their own sort of floor. So, so they go through all your lessons before you can do them. So you have to get approvals for that. And then the guards are there, who are women who patrol the campus 24/7. And then, it is all bugged wherever you go. And then your class is being recorded and reported on. Somebody's making a report, one of the students. I never knew which one. And but we knew they were. And then, the students do report on each other and also on you. So you're just not alone. I mean, it's just never alone.
Even so, you developed a very strong bond with your students.
I did. I really, 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 really did. And it's an odd, it's an odd thing to try to explain, but I think, they were not allowed to leave the campus. And we weren't. Teachers were allowed out with a minder, like on a weekend, to go grocery shopping to get extra supplies. And then they organized the sightseeing, like the subway, or the Grand People's Library, the same sites that the visitor foreigners get to see. I mean, we saw a little more because we were long. I did see Mount Kumgang, I saw Mount Myohyang, but and like the apple farm, which is considered the 11th wonder of North Korea. But it doesn't really matter, because whatever you're shown is going to be about the great leader. I mean, you go to the mountain, it's about the great leader, because you see mountain for a little bit, and then there's like a great leader palace you get shown, which, gift palace, which is where all the gifts that were given to the great leader are being shown. So you spend more time doing that. Or the apple farm. I remember going to the apple farm. I mean, it's really apple farm. There's nothing there. And then you just get this lecture after lecture about, when the great leader came to see this apple and what great leader was like. The apple is very great. the apple's growing really well, and he came again, and he said the apple's even greater this year. So basically, this is this kind of story so. It was very exhausting, those trips, because it was like same story over and over. And it's a groundhog day, right? Like we're doing it again, deja vu. Didn't we just do this? And so, I mean, but at least we got to do that. The students never did. So when just nothing ever happens and your life is so meticulously mapped out, their schedules were like down to the minute. You know, they get up at 5:30. They do the group. They were also never alone, because everything is done in a group. So they were scheduled like group exercise, group singing, then group breakfast, then group, and then they do this like, there is no group, even a nap. There was a time for siesta, which I found really strange too. But, they all had to disappear and sleep. And then they do a juche class every day.
And what is that?
The self-reliance, juche is the North Korean founding philosophy, which means self-reliance. And they go and take this class. It's kind of like going to a church. So there is like this Kim Jong Il-ism study hall in the campus, which is where they go and study Kim Il-sung-ism. So that's like the study of Kim Il-sung. And so this building, which we weren't allowed to enter, the students were. They went there every day to yet again study the great leader. They went and studied him basically every day. So, they just had like nothing. They had a lot of duties. So they had to guard the Kim Il-sung-ism building 24/7. It's an empty classroom building. I mean, there's nothing there, but they had to guard it. So, when your life is so mapped out like that and nothing ever deters from it, I think that's why we really got close, because we really only had each other. And they're like 19 and 20. And by the end, they did say, few of them said to me, they would never say, they wrote them in a letter that I assigned. I told them to just write me weekly letters. I just felt like that was the way to get to know them. And, they would always like write about great leader, the greatness of the great leader. But then by the end, they did say, I'm fed up. I got a letter, I remember a couple of them were like, I'm fed up. My life is just waking up, learning English, going back to dormitory. And they're not allowed out or keep in touch with their mom and dad. They were 19 and 20. I think that's why. When you really have nothing, they have no internet. I mean, they didn't know what internet was. Then you get close, because you're the only thing that happens to them. They would like I think what it was, and it's a hard thing to explain, but it's almost like, I don't have children, but I think for those of you who have kids, like, I remember being this, when I was little, like when my dad comes home, I would just jump up and down, although I just saw him. And I think kids do that, right? Like when they're little, like, although they just saw their mom, they're just so happy to see their mom. And I felt like my kids started doing that. Like, they would see me across the campus or something, and they would just like burst into this, they were just so happy. Because I did realize at some point, I'm the only thing they've got. And they're the only thing I've got. And that feeling did grow the longer I stay there.
So then you came back to New York between semesters, and you missed them.
I really missed them, yeah. Well, it was a real weird feeling, because it is so different from being in North Korea and then when you get out. I almost couldn't leave the house when I got out, because it's like a culture shock. And it seems so surreal in a way. And I really miss them. And then I got back there, and they just been like, it's like jumping up and down, joy. So I think it was, also they're very innocent. That was really an odd thing about them. They're like 19 and 20, and only men, they were, when I was there in this locked, I mean, it wasn't literally locked, but, none of us could leave. There were 270 young men, and then there were like 30 missionary teachers, and I was one of them. So they were like, I think the average, I mean, not everybody was 19 and 20 except a few graduate students. And because I think they're the sons of elite, they're just so like immaculate, like really, really young men. of creme de la creme of North Korea, I guess. But they acted like they were sometimes like, I felt like they were like 7. They were really like little boys on some sense because they didn't know. Like they didn't know. They had no idea of some things. I don't know how many of them truly didn't know, but I believe some of them really didn't know. Like Taj Mahal, they'd never heard of it or seen it, or Eiffel Tower, or just like things that they just didn't know, and it was sort of their idea. I guess it was a sheltered. Information was so narrow. Like they only knew specifically the great leader stuff. But anything else was like just, because they've only seen their country, nothing else.
So when you came back, it was winter, and it was colder.
It's cold. Pyongyang's cold, and which makes me it's really hard to imagine how colder it is up in the north, because Pyongyang's not that north of North Korea. But it's and I was cold all the time, and I get cold anyway. And my boys, the kids started asking me. They're like, "Is New York cold?" And then I would say like, "Yeah, it is actually cold in New York." So they're like, "Why are you so cold here?" And I couldn't tell them it's because you don't have heat the way we do. They had some heat towards the end, but the I don't know, like just to be in those classroom buildings, like I think the reason we don't get as cold, like here, we're not, we can, even if on a cold night, we don't need to be wearing a coat. But if I'm constantly cold wherever I am, like I'm just cold to the bone. But I couldn't tell them that, because then that's one of the rules that I couldn't criticize their country. So I couldn't say, it's a good question. There were moments like that where the answer was so obvious that I just could not. Like another one I have in the book is the blackout, because even here where there is so much more, they had so much more than outside, which obviously their government was not going to show it to us. But still, the electricity got cut every day, nearly every day. As the winter came, it just would be dark, just utter dark. Also because there's no like lamp outside either, so it's like black pitch dark. So they said like, so we always carried a flashlight with us, and one of my students was like, oh, he wanted me to teach him how to say, because I could hear them all saying in Korean, oh, the lights come back, because we were walking back and the light came back because it had been a blackout. So they're like, so how do you say that in English? Because they all said it in Korean. I said, well, you can say lights come back on. It's a useful phrase there. Light has gone out and come back. It's a very useful phrase in North Korea. And they said, so in New York, do lights go out like this? And I was like, no. I didn't mean, and then I was just like, oh, never. And then it was like those moments when I lost, who I was talking, I forgot. And I felt
because
like I was.
That was breaking the rules.
No, no, never. Yeah, they asked. So, it was like because it's relevant to their situation. It wasn't, I wasn't supposed to. If I say never, because it's better over there. It's not as good here. Like that comparison was no good. But it was more, I think, by then, because it was towards the end, I remember, I just realized I hurt them by saying that. Like, I was being sort of like flippant or something. Oh, like it doesn't happen in New York. And then I felt bad. And I was like, I don't want you to right away say, actually, it has happened. Like we did have a blackout here when we, all the newspapers wrote about. And I think I was actually out of the country. But I remember like all my friends were freaking out, and I wanted to tell him actually there was a blackout, but I couldn't. Now then it seems so ridiculous. Like, oh, the whole city panicked and went crazy, and here it's a daily occurrence. So it's those moments that were really like heartbreaking.
So to continue the heartbreaking theme, tell us about Harry Potter.
Oh, there were a lot of anecdotes in the book. So, obviously, because it's like living in a prison. So there were incidences that stick out, and Harry Potter was one of them, where by the end, because I think they have so little, so when they pick up something, it sticks. So they started asking me, so tell us about Harry Potter or Hermione, and what about Ron? And I thought they read the book, but they don't read anything. They don't know any American. The only English book they know is Sidney Sheldon. And do you know who Sidney Sheldon is? This is an author they know for some reason. I don't know why. Yeah, this is like the master English writer they know, Sidney Sheldon. I don't know what, it's a little like, I don't know who brought Sidney Sheldon in, but somebody brought, I'm sure now it's like the only foreigner they know is Dennis Rodman. It's that kind of thing. It's so surreal why Dennis Rodman got chosen to go there. But now, all North Koreans would know Dennis Rodman. I think that's what happened with Sidney Sheldon. For some reason, they know Sidney Sheldon, but the only book they know is Disappeared with the Wind.
They call it Disappeared
with the Wind, which is Gone with the Wind. And they know it because they all say, I know English books, and it's, Disappear with the Wind. And I realize it's because it's North and South, Gone with the Wind, and North winds, right? So, it just kind of makes sense that's the only book that they could identify with, which was Disappear with the Wind. But so now they say Harry Potter.
But how did they find out about Harry Potter?
Because I learned that it's because, like, before I got there in the spring semester, they said they used this really outdated Chinese textbook that was approved by the counterparts. And so it was an teaching English textbook, but that was used in China. And there was a mention, I think. Those like English ESL books would have a phrase or like a paragraph. So I think it says something about J.K. Rowling and this very, very, very popular book. So they all knew it was very popular. So they knew like Harry and Hermione and Ron and Quidditch. I don't know how to pronounce Quidditch. Yeah, they all knew that. They're like, so is it fun? As if like I play that. And I was like, then I found out that one of the teachers had a Harry Potter with her, like DVD. So I had this thought that I'm going to show it to them, but I didn't know how. So I made a big deal that we need to do a lesson. And then I got approved by the counterpart, amazingly, that I'll show part of the movie for my last class. And then I learned that there was a movie night that was scheduled, movie day, the whole class, like whole freshman class. So 100 freshmen will be watching a foreign movie, which they were not allowed. The only movie they've seen was like March of Penguin, because they can only see like animation. They can't really see a movie where it's a real life. So they can't see a movie that would show like Manhattan, how like that there is no blackout. And so I thought maybe we can swap, like, because they already chose Chronicle of Narnia. The teachers had chosen Narnia as the movie to be seen. So I said, but everybody's so obsessed with Harry Potter, so could we just show Harry Potter and show them? And then I got into an argument with some teachers were okay with it, and then Narnia actually got rejected, amazingly, because that was shown once before, I was told. And the counterparts were fine with it, but now they were suspicious why they are insisting on Narnia. But there was a reason why Narnia was chosen. I personally have never seen Narnia, but supposedly it's very, very Christian. So Narnia was chosen for the Christian theme, but the counterparts rejected it. So now we have no film to show them. So, and we need approval, so approval takes a few days. So then teachers began panicking. They said, okay, let's show Harry Potter, because it's already been approved because of me. So, but then one teacher just went so upset. She said, so she and I started fighting, and she said, I will not show my students Harry Potter because it's not, it's evil. Harry Potter is evil. And I said, I don't think Harry Potter is evil. But I realized why, and there was no way I could convince her. But I felt like, but they want to see it, and it's the only chance they've got. So by the end, we were crying. It felt so intense, this fight that we had, like this teacher and I by the end. And we were screaming, basically. She will not, she said, we'll cancel the whole movie day if they have to see Harry Potter. And I said, but even like North Koreans are okay with it. Could we show them? And the compromise I had to make was I had 2 classes. And so I had 50 students to teach. and they said I can only show to one class. So I had to choose. It's like, what is the story that we have to?
Sophie's choice.
Yeah, I had to choose one. I mean, they were like my babies, and they were so excited every day. I felt like meal because you don't. I mean, what can you talk about when nothing ever happens? So at meal, the conversation was the same thing all the time. I mean, the thing about being in North Korea, it's a deja vu constantly. It's like a repeat of same thing over and over and over and over. So even the conversation by the end was all about how excited they were about Harry Potter. And I did have to tell them that I'm only showing it to one class. And I didn't have a reason why. I just had to say, I can't, this is not my decision. But it was horrifying to have to just show it to one class. And I think I never got to explain because I had to leave after showing Harry Potter. Kim Jong Il died, and I had to leave the country. I never explained to them why I had to choose one class, and I mean, that's how it ended, literally.
Well, maybe we should open the floor for some questions, and then we have a video.
Yeah. I guess I would have to say that I left when Kim Jong Il died. My last day in North Korea was the day we saw the Harry Potter that morning, and then we came down, and the students were taken to a special meeting that noon, and so we were like talking about Harry Potter. But I was leaving next day. I was very like very like they were so heartbroken, and then they were off to the meeting, and one of the students said to me. They kept asking, so when are you coming back? When will I see you again? And I told them I probably wouldn't be coming back. And I remember one of the last things we talked about was that one student said, like they're children, so they ask the same thing over and over and over and over. Although I just told them I'm not coming back, they'll be like, so are you coming back? So, I think kids do that. They ask the same thing over and over and over. But the one student said, oh, when will I see you face to face? And I said, we can Skype. Because by the end, I kept dropping the word Skype. It was like, they didn't know really what it was. But I was like, we can Skype. And then they said again, they're like, but how will I see you face to face? And I was like, well, that's the whole point of Skype. But they're like, no, how will I see you again? And then one student said, I know how. I will study very hard and I will become basically the ambassador, the UN mission to New York, and I can come and I can finally see you. And I thought, God, that's the only way a North Korean can come to New York is to become an ambassador, because basically he's the only one who can come here. And I remember that heaviness in my heart, and then they went off to the meeting, and that was it. That meeting was when the Kim Jong Il's death was announced, and I left the next day.